This evening are presentations followed by a conversation between 2009 fellow in visual arts, Marie Lawrence, and the 2009 fellow in music, Kurt Rode. But first, I'd like to introduce our guest curator from the Society of Fellows Programs and Events Committee, Rochelle Feinstein. Rochelle is a 2018 fellow in visual arts. She's a multimedia painter and an emerita professor of painting at Yale School of Art. She recently had 4 concurrent retrospectives from 2016 to 2019 in Geneva, Switzerland, Munich, Hanover, and New York. Her work uses humor to question the dogmas of modernism while borrowing from multiple different schools of painting and other art mediums. Currently, she's working on a show called You Again, an exhibit that spans 6 venues in Europe and the United States. In addition to her Rome Prize, Rochelle is the recipient of several fellowships, including the Guggenheim Fellowship, fellowship from the Radcliffe Institute and the Joan Mitchell Foundation. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you, that's a little hand clap. Well, welcome everybody. I'm really thrilled to introduce this project to everyone and to also see it, which I have not yet. So we have Marie here, Kurt's here, and Dana is there, but Kurt and Marie are going to be doing a presentation. And when we get to the end, to the part where you unmute. Child, when you can unmute, Dana will be available to call and response. So the fellows, as you know, met in 2008, and the Odyssey has been in development since the time they were all in residence at the AAR. The Newtown Odyssey is a floating opera that addresses environmental catastrophe and justice. A recipient of a 2021 Creative Capital Award, the opera will be performed in New York City in 2022. So, Marie Lorenz lives and works in New York City and teaches at the Fashion Institute of Technology, where I went for 6 years. Her work is rooted in navigation and narrative. Marie has shown her work extensively throughout the US and Europe and has been in residence at ArtPace and the John Michael Kohler Center. In her ongoing project, the Tide and Current Taxi, she has taken participants through New York's waterways, in boats that she designs and builds using tidal currents to propel the boat. The Tide Taxi is now ready for in-person and virtual trips. The theme is low tide, and if you're interested in joining her for either live or virtual, you can email Marie at tideandcurrenttaxi, one word, @gmail.com. I'm going to do that. Kurt Rode lives in San Francisco and teaches at UC Davis. He plays viola, is the artistic advisor with the Left Coast Chamber Ensemble, artistic director of the Composers Conference, and a curator at the Center of New Music. Recent projects include new works for the Lydian String Quartet, the Grossman Ensemble, and Ensemble Échappé. Kurt has spearheaded 2 initiatives to create opportunities for composers: the Kurt Rode Composers Fund and Kurt Rode's Farewell Tour project that targets underappreciated creative voices in the new music community by commissioning new works for viola. Dana Spiotta, who is joining us this evening, is the author of 5 novels. Forthcoming is Wayward, to be published in a second in July. In reviewing Wayward in the New York Times June 23rd issue, Parul Segal termed it a, quote, furious and addictive new novel, end quote. Dana has been a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, the National Book Award, and is a recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, a NIFA Fellowship, the Primo Pivano, and the John Updike Prize from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Welcome, everyone. I now am going to hand over the screen to Kurt and Marie and mute myself. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Rochelle.
Thank you.
Marie and I wanted to thank the Society of Fellows for having us talk today and present. And we're just gonna have a little conversation about how we met, how we got started on what we just are doing now, and what it means for what this type of collaboration means to us. And Dana will be joining us for the question and answer portion. So I guess I will start just by talking about our time in Rome. We were in Rome in 2008-9, which you may all remember as being sort of an interesting time. It was the last big financial crisis, and it was also the Obama election. And being in Rome at that time was pretty exciting. And I think that what was also really interesting for us was that we sort of were experiencing all that from the outside the United States. While I was in, being in Rome for me was really transformative. My husband and I talk about life as being before Rome and after Rome. It was a place of, it was just a really amazing year in terms of the level of gratitude and also the level of stimulation that I felt. And the cohort that we were with it was sort of an extraordinary group of people. I can't really imagine it having been any other way. That year I had a number of projects, but I decided relatively early on that the final project for my time in Rome was going to be a collaborative work, which would involve everyone who wanted to participate to be part of the project. So it had all the scholars and the artists and the researchers and staff members who wanted to be part of this project. It was a puppet opera for basically telling the story of Romulus and Remus. And Marie was one of the artists who was part of the project, and yeah, it was sort of a great experience. It was also a really great turning point for me because it really allowed me to reimagine the potential of collaborative projects and my investment and my part in what that dynamic actually meant. Since then, I've gone on to actually write, operas for the stage. I wrote an opera about 6 years ago using Jose Saramago's Death with Interruptions. And then I did another opera based on a portion of Don Quixote, the first book. And that was with collaborating with artist David Humphrey, who was also at the Academy, and Jennifer Coates, also at the Academy our year. And I'm trying to think of other things I've done since then. I've got another short little opera coming up with poet Donna Massini, whose collection 430 Movie has a series of really exquisite scenes in it that I thought would be a tremendous sort of micro opera project, and we're going to be doing that in a couple of years. And so I just, over the course of my time since the Academy, collaboration has become sort of central to what I do. And I just wanted to now hand over to Dana about her, or not Dana, to Marie about her collaboration with Dana since the Academy.
Yes, thank you, Kurt. Yeah, Kurt's referring to I guess it was in 2011, Dana asked me to come on a 3-day journey down the Erie Canal for an article that she was writing for the New York Times Magazine. And so we packed, I'm going to show you some images of that actually. It was a quite beautiful area. And this is not my photograph. This was actually the photographer that the New York Times Magazine sent. And we spent 3 days camping along the Erie Canal and traveling in my boat that Rochelle talked about when she described the Tide and Current taxi. And I think it was significant for me because, you know what, thinking about collaboration, thinking about what the American Academy sort of provided, these like close-knit communities. My favorite collaborations aren't just when artists come together and sort of create a work together, but when that coming together actually completely changes the course for both artists. And so for me, the trip with Dana was really significant because I guess 4 years later, I think before Dana had asked me to do this trip on the Erie Canal, I just sort of, I don't know if I really thought about it in connection to the New York Harbor, but through Dana's eyes, I sort of saw the historic significance of the canal. And then a couple of years later, paddled the entire Erie Canal from Buffalo to New York City over the course of a month and a half, and made a live stream, had a show at the Everson Museum where I was live streaming that event as I paddled along. And so it was just a really significant time, a really significant sort of excursion that I feel like the collaboration with Dana had sort of had inspired. But I think thinking about the year at the Academy, Kurt is so right. 2008 was just such a turning point in the country, and certainly for us as artists. And when I just wanted to show a couple images from the American Academy, because it was it sort of shows like how it changed my thinking about sort of the art object and the and sort of experience, the experience of the art, my experience. I made a sailboat when I was at the American Academy, and I like looking at this now, I'm just like, what on earth was I thinking? But I made this like tiny little sailboat. I had never built, I make these rowboats that I navigate the New York Harbor in. And so I was like, oh, I'm in, I'll just navigate the Mediterranean, or, in this like sailboat. And of course it was a total disaster. This is what the time that it actually worked. And then there was a time that it absolutely did not work, and I capsized off Ostia and was sort of blown out to sea in the boat. But I had a video camera on the boat at the time, this little tiny, like, it was sort of like before GoPro, but it was this little sort of crappy waterproof camera that I, was like the one piece of equipment that I took when I swam back to shore, and the boat was sort of sucked out to sea. And the video that I made when I first looked at it, when I got, back to the Academy and sort of like figured out how to open the file and like looked at it on my video screen, there was a couple of us standing in the room, like looking at this video, and I was sort of horrified what it captured. It was just seemed too revealing or too scary or too raw. But then over the course of the next day, couple days, like talking to people about it, it was those elements that really, I don't know, sort of made it hit home. And so I feel like it was a turning point in that video, sort of my experience at the Academy was a turning point in my artwork in terms of like the art object and sort of its, I don't know, kind of like trying to, instead of sort of trying to create this, this constructed narrative around the experience, sort of trying to subtract something from its core. And maybe I'll just talk for a minute because it's going to come. I feel like one of my main sort of works in the New York Harbor is going to come up when Kurt and I start to talk about the Newtown Odyssey. So I'll just sort of describe that really briefly right now. But I've done a project since 2005 called the Tide and Current Taxi. Rochelle was referencing this because you can email me, and you tell me somewhere you want to go in the New York Harbor, and I will study the tidal charts of the harbor and figure out when we go based on the tidal currents. The sort of caveat is that we're in a tiny little rowboat, and people often ask how much I charge for this taxi. And the joke I always make is it's free, because you get a ride in the boat, but I get to tell the story of the trip. And it's a little bit of an unequal exchange, because we might not always get where we're going. We're in a tiny boat. It's a huge harbor. You can see from this slide, it's very polluted waterway. But I always get a great story. So it's like sort of a little bit weighted toward my benefit. But I also wanted to just insert one like little snippet. Another interesting connection for me being in this room, a really meaningful connection for me, is that the Tide and Current Taxi and kind of the little kernel of I don't know, like thought that inspired the Tide and Current Taxi was actually in Rochelle's class at Yale in 2002. And Rochelle had a really great class called Imitation of Life. And it was really like a crit group and sort of a reading list and kind of a watch list, and Rochelle's really astute observations and critique. and in that class, I made a piece that kind of became the Tide and Current Taxi years later, but I made a piece that, thinking about the American Academy and that video where I had sort of distilled the experience down to this little piece, that really, I don't know, it's great to be here because I think about that in relation to Rochelle's class as well. So another cool, I can't really say it's a collaboration, but it's a cool connection that has really changed my path. So we're going to, I feel like we've both talked a little bit about our work and time at the American Academy. So now what I would like to do is I'm actually going to pin, I wonder if I can spotlight Kurt and myself. Can I add? So now maybe you should be seeing both Kurt and I a little bigger. So now I'm going to ask Kurt some questions about the opera, and we're going to have sort of a conversation about it. We're probably going to talk in this way until about maybe 6:45, and then we'll open the dialogue up to the whole audience. But I would like to start by asking Kurt, what is an opera? What is it?
Yeah, people spend a lot of time talking about opera. They love to talk about opera. So I have my own strange little understanding of opera, and I sort of feel like opera is this place where singing and theater intersect on some type of stage. We can talk about stage as well, in order to achieve storytelling. We have a really classic idea of opera. Maybe I'll just show my little funny little slide and tell me if it's not sharing properly, please.
That looks great.
Here we go. Is it just one?
Yes.
So this is sort of like what we typically think of as opera. So it's on some type of grand stage, it's high production, it's extravagant, it's spectacle. It has a really specific cultural frame. It's pretty stylized. The stories are for the most part stories that can be pretty ridiculous, fantastic, dramatic, but they all sort of fit within a certain frame, and they rarely leave that frame, no matter how much you try to really mix them up. And I think that has a lot to do with the actual sense, with place rather than actual story. In recent years, opera has certainly evolved in a lot of different ways, most certainly with different topics and subjects for the actual opera. Scale, having to deal with different types of scale, scaling down or scaling up or scaling out. That's a different way for opera to be considered. But I'm really interested in thinking of opera as this experience where you can actually think about the sound, the intensity of the meaning, the relationships that are happening on stage, what's happening, so that it makes you really care about what's going on. I often feel that a lot of times when I'm in an opera, I'm observing, but I'm not actually connecting. And I sort of want that connection of caring, because when you actually care what's happening, I sort of feel like that, in fact, is opera. It's so that it becomes this activation. It's almost like a verb rather than a noun. And that takes us to our opera, which I sort of feel is going to be very, maybe not revolutionary, but it's really trying to get inside of what it means to make opera a verb. So instead of it just taking place on a stage, it's going to take place in a place that's a different type of stage, and not just one stage. It's going to be outdoors and different locations at the same time. You don't have to experience it linearly. You can go to one location and just experience it at one location. There's no order of it. That is mandatory. It's focusing on things that are discarded or dismantled or disgusting, which is not something that you typically see in an opera situation, operatic situation. And it's really about uncovering what is unseen and unheard, and so that it is revealed in a really, I don't know, sort of a captivating and unusual, compelling way. So that's my definition of opera.
That's really, yeah. Yeah, I feel like I've been using that term. I feel like I thought I knew what, like I had these images in my mind when I hear that term, but I never really like knew how it was defined sort of, from a, I don't know, almost like an academic standpoint or something. And that's really helpful to like, I don't know what the parameters are and how we can kind of break them or something.
Yeah, I mean, it really fits into, I mean, opera is a genre, and it's a very specific type of genre for a very specific type of cultural utility. And there are different types of opera genres in different cultures, but it really has a very specific purpose that I think, especially for opera, that we see in the American Eurocentric stage craft. It doesn't really operate outside of that frame very much. And I'm having done 2 operas, which were really wonderful inside of that frame, I'm really ready to try to step out.
Right.
And so I talked a little bit about this idea of this opera taking place in many places, and so I wanted to ask you, why this place? Why Newtown Creek?
Well, so I'll sort of describe I don't know, maybe like for not New Yorkers, I'll kind of describe what, oh wait, let me do this. I'll describe where and what it is. So the Newtown Creek is a body of water, formerly like an estuary, but now it's sort of been canalized. So, hard banks have been created, buildings have been put right up against the canal. And it's a 3.5 mile, basically a canal that is in most of its, it's the border, it defines the border between like Long Island City and Brooklyn, between Queens and Brooklyn. It's also considered one of the most polluted industrial sites in the US, not just one of the most polluted bodies of water, but a most polluted place in the United States. And it was just really the site of like incredible industry at the turn of the century, and all of that stuff just went right into the canal. And so it's a Superfund site. It's considered highly toxic. There's heavy metal. There's all kinds of contaminants. There's also the combined sewer overflow system is a huge problem in Newtown Creek. So there's currently, it's not just the old sort of industrial pollutants, but also fresh biological pollutants that are going into the creek every day, every time it rains. And so it's just a really complicated site. And that's sort of its claim to fame. The other factor that I think is really important to like think about with the Newtown Creek is that it's really hard to see it, because most of the land along the bank of the Newtown Creek is either utility, like this is Con Edison and the sewage treatment plant on the left, or private industry that really just use it as like parking lots, kind of, there's not a lot of, well, actually, that's not true. There's a lot of industry that uses the fact that it's a canal as well, like a recycling plant and an asphalt crushing plant. So some industry uses the water, and then some just uses the cheap land along this really polluted site as like a parking lot. All of that to say that there's not many places that you can walk up to the creek and look at it. So a lot of people living in that neighborhood don't really even, unless they sort of look at their, Google Maps or something, don't really know like where it is in relation to their house or their themselves. And so that's one of the things that I think is really important to know about it, is that it's hard to see unless you're in a boat. And then you sort of see the inside of that dynamic, where it's just an incredible quiet, like private place, because all of the backs of this industry are sort of, all of this stuff has its back to you, kind of. And it can be like a really beautiful place, a really wild place. There's herons and all kinds of wildlife, well, mostly birds, but it's just it's sort of got this really interesting dynamic of being a really, I don't know, just you're like inside, the city's like inside out or something when you're in this space.
Marie,
yeah.
I just wanted to say there's something really interesting about just that idea of it being inside, because I remember when you first talked about the creek years ago to me, and I'm from New York, and I was like, the Newtown Creek, I mean, what's that? I mean, I knew of it, but I had no visual memory of what it was, other than just knowing where it was. And then when you took me there, it is sort of like when you actually get to inside of that, the creek itself, between the banks, all of a sudden it's like everything not so much falls away, but you really feel like you're being wiped in to something
Right.
completely different.
Yeah, I think that day, like Kurt and I took, maybe like a 3-hour walk around, kind of like the site that we're looking at now. We took sort of a 3-mile walk around that, or 3-hour walk around that area. And we saw the creek like 3 times, because there's just these little snippets that you can see, like when you go over a bridge, or there's like these little, the Newtown Creek Alliance has done a really great job of, wherever they possibly can make a little parklet, they have made these sort of areas where you can get right down to the water and kind of look at it. And so I guess, thinking back to that walk, Kurt, that was, I want to say that was like, I mean, everything's at least 1.5 years ago because of COVID, but I think that walk was it was 3 years ago. Kurt and I took a walk and started thinking about the opera. And Kurt, what was it that, let me stop sharing and let's ask Kurt, what was it that attracted you? Because it was Kurt that started thinking about this site for opera. And so what was it that attracted you to that?
I think that what basically was happening, especially back then, I know what was happening back then, was that I've been formulating ideas for a long time about this idea of catastrophe and failure. Which is sort of this strange obsession of mine, which actually goes back a little bit to your, even further back to your haphazard video of your shipwreck on the Mediterranean. And I do remember, I think we had a conversation in your studio and you showed me the footage and I was like, you couldn't make this up had it not been a complete catastrophe in the way that it was. There was just something about the thrill and the danger of that catastrophe being caught on film, unplanned, that made me start. It was a small piece in a larger set of events where I was just thinking, catastrophe and failure is such a big part of process, but it's never acknowledged and never really talked about because it's very difficult to have the vocabulary to talk about it. So over the years, I've been thinking about it a lot and trying to work it into what I do. And when we looked at the creek, and I thought to myself, I really want to start doing stuff that addresses the physical nature, like physical sites, which are catastrophic. And how do you bring something that is so well formed and developed and has a really clear tradition and evolution, even if it's complicated, as opera onto a site that is a complete catastrophe? How do you make these things that don't go together? So that's what I just want to put. I like putting things that shouldn't belong together. Yeah.
And how do you see the music actually working in that kind of a site?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I'll be coming out in a couple of weeks and we'll be going out there and we'll be visiting sites and doing sound studies. I think that what's really clear is that it's going to have to be a very different way of making music, of hearing music. And even the idea of the compositional process is I'm going to have to very much upend it, all the stuff that I've learned. So what I'm imagining are very simple instruments. Most likely we'll be dealing with pre-recorded sounds, amplification and sound reinforcement on site with battery operated equipment. No live processing. I don't want to have anything where the hardware could possibly go wrong. But if I do, the type of processing I am imagining would be something like a distortion or a reverb pedal, something very, very simple. We've also discussed building these small stages out of found materials on each site and using that almost like a shell to focus the sound. Certain sites like under the bridge, I can find the resonant frequency for that particular site and then use that to the advantage of the actual sound production. But I can't imagine having someone with their cello going out on the boat. I mean, I just don't see that happening. We've also talked about building instruments. I'm really into this idea of hacking an instrument. So, but simple instruments. So something like a melodica, you take it apart, you screw around with the inside, you put it back together, you hook it up to a reverb pedal, and you experiment with that until you find the sounds that you want to work with. So it's all, right now it's all sort of all over the place, but that's sort of what I'm imagining. It's going to be very different than writing a string quartet.
You have a drawing of that, don't you?
Oh yeah, I do. I mean, what do I have here? Let me find something. Thank you for that subtle cue. Let me see, what can I find for you here? Let's do this. Is that one slide?
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay, so this is sort of like what we imagine, multiple sites, the red dots being multiple sites along the creek. And I'm sort of imagining the music as operating antiphonally, but not typically antiphonal music. So call and response is often understood as being, binary. So this goes out, it's heard, it's responded to. It's just back and forth, back and forth. But I'm thinking of it as being a multiplicity of call and responses, and maybe sometimes not even responding, and maybe even the idea of response not even being something that has to be activated by, you hear the call and you respond to the actual call. So here are the multiple sites. They would only be accessible by the audience in boats, and we would be building small stages for each scene. These are photos from a troupe called the Lebanese Trash Theater. And I just sort of think they're incredible. So yeah, this is pretty close to the type of stuff I imagine we could be able to do. More close up here, these are just like small, more up close images of possible sites, a raft or just a bank. And I would have the singers, that's Charlotte Mundy, who you'll hear singing pretty soon. Just basically being on site with the battery powered sound amplification and reinforcement. Or it could be something like this, where you would have a small choir, that's Quince right there, singing on the bank of the marsh. So it's, conceptually, it's actually relatively straightforward. Logistically, it's incredibly complicated. So that's sort of where we are. I think the biggest, my biggest concern, which is something I'm going to be, let me get rid of this. Why can't I get out? Here we go. Yeah, so my biggest concern right now is how to use the sound of the world, the natural world, as part of the piece, because I don't want to make believe it's not there, which I think is a lot of what's done when things are outside. They try to cover it up or to cancel it. Yeah. And I really want, that's why we're going to be spending some time, I'm going to be spending some time on the creek, just observing the types of sounds, the durations of sounds, the intensity of sounds, the range of it all, and somehow figuring a way that the sound is actually part of the music and part of the story, and maybe even to become really important sonic cues for things.
It's interesting because the sound of the creek is so variable. There's like, sometimes it can be absolutely quiet and you can hear birds chirping and stuff. And then sometimes there can be these like tremendous, cement crushing, just like industry venting, crazy sound. And I was thinking like, I pay attention to the tide and those kinds of fluctuations in the creek, but now I feel like I'll be more tuned to the fluctuations of sound, and those run on a totally different clock. It's not even the days of the week, like, they have off on Sunday. Right. It's like, is the price of metal you know, expensive enough to want to like crush it on site and send it across the ocean or something. Like the fluctuations of like the price of recycled metal or something are these other kinds of like tides that can fluctuate and really cause either big problems for us or really cool things to work off of, because it's really unpredictable, or at least to me, it seems unpredictable. But maybe there's something that we can sort of tune into that would
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
indicate that. I wanted to show an image of something, another kind of like sound related thing that Kurt and I have talked about, which is the idea that some of the sets for the opera could also function as instruments. There's a wrecked car, and you'll see these images again when we're going to show like just a 1-minute video in a minute, and you'll see some of these images again. But just to talk about this for a second, there's a wrecked car that kind of comes out of the creek at low tide, and we were talking about, could you like use elements of the frame of the car and like string them like a string instrument? And Kurt was thinking about these really cool instruments where it's not like strummed like a guitar or even played like a bow. It would be like you would run your hand across the string or something and produce sound. So we were thinking of, can the set be also, you know, produce sound? And I've been sort of obsessed with this, here's that floating dock again, but I've been sort of obsessed with this idea that one of the sets could be, you know, I picture like the characters in the opera being people that would be out there on just any day, like like the costumes would look like a worker or something that would be out on the creek anyway. And one of the kind of like ideas that I've just like always been obsessed with is the idea that there would be this like citizen scientist who's like collecting water
It's really
samples.
nice, Boo. You got it. It's all the news is lining up.
Wait, let me oh wait. So yeah,
I thought you laid out the conditions pretty well. Here's the range. You're in the range.
wait, let me just okay, yeah. So the idea would be that the citizen scientist has this this collection of glass, but then that glass could also be an instrument. So that's one of the things I was thinking of.
Yeah, I'm really excited by that, the idea of making this glass instrument. I think that'll, and also even just stringing up the rotting, decrepit car and putting some contact mics on it.
Right.
That's the way to go.
So it seems like we should maybe go into kind of open the
Show the video
to the audience. Oh yeah, we should show the video. Yeah.
Let's show. We made a little video that is sort of like in a storybook form with sound. Let me just show you what exactly this is, and I think that putting the sound together for this video might give a little bit of insight as to the way that I'm going to be working with making the music for this. So this is Charlotte Mundy who's singing, and to create the sound for this, I basically wrote, let's do this, hold on a second, please. I basically wrote some music like this. I think you see one.
Yeah, I see.
Okay, great. So I wrote some music like this. This is just basically a vocalese because Dana's still working on this on the libretto. So we decided, well, let's make just, you know, this is just have a vocalese. And I, thinking just about the site and watching some videos and listening to some videos that Marie had taken while going on Newtown Creek, and some of which were with Dana on a recent visit, I created this music, which is really very modular, and I'm sort of imagining a lot of the music for this piece to actually be pretty modular. So the two pages that you see there are basically the musical materials, but what was interesting to me was to use this idea of a certain type of directions, different types of performance directions that would be characteristics for the music to be interpreted by the singer. So what happened was that Charlotte basically sent me multiple versions of the music that you see written here using those characteristics and the flow chart that I wrote there. It's nothing sophisticated, but for me, this is already in and of itself a pretty different approach to writing music. And then I just basically edited everything together to create the video. And I have the video here, the sound for the video. So here we get that set up for you. It's right here.
And the video is like 1.5 minutes, and then I think we'll open it up to audience questions.
Great.
Tell you a little bit about what cool.
Cool. And maybe we can invite Dana.
Oh yeah, maybe Dana could turn her camera on. So I guess we'll, I'm not sure how this part usually works. Do people just like turn on their camera and ask a question?
Yes.
Or just, okay, good, awesome.
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm interested in what the libretto will be, Dana. It's interesting to me that there's this entire industrial world there. Obviously, there are people that go to work there every day. Is the libretto going to be about kind of the history of the canal, or is it about something that takes place as an event? Does it include the people that are there?
Yeah, all of the above. It's we came up with this idea for the story, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but the audience will be, I mean, because we have to accommodate, the constraint is that a lot of things could happen. There's going to be some flexibility, and it's going to be modular in the sense that if this is the time when, this industrial site, they're moving all of this, happen to be moving a bunch of boats that stop you, you have to then pivot to another part of the story. But the idea would be that the people would be on boats, and the boats are a tour of the creek, and part of the things they're going to see are contemporary, and part of the things are going to be from the past, and part of them are going to be sort of the music that Kurt was making is really perfect for the sound of the creek itself. So, and each of these, there is a narrative and there is a story, and there are characters who are also on boats. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Dana doesn't want to spoil the ending for you.
Are there other queries?
I have a question. I'm just curious about the legality of the city allowing people to be in the creek, as well as the different stages that were be presented the music at the different points. I'm curious as how this came about, you know, talking with the city, getting clearance. Was it complicated? Did they be like, no, this is crazy? How could you talk a little bit about the process of how this came about and from that standpoint?
Maybe we could just say, no one in the room should tell the city of New York that we're doing this. Not really, not really. I
Guerrilla style.
can. So we're working with the Newtown Creek Alliance and the North Brooklyn Boat Club, who have sort of long established, you know, I don't know, like access points to the creek, understanding the creek, permission in and around the creek. And I think that some of the sites, maybe we could just like stop the recording for a minute. No, just kidding. Some of the sites will be totally, like we're thinking about having a big part of we want there to be the audience in the boats that are sort of experiencing, the audience isn't in boats, the performers are on land, and the audience is sort of moving among the performers. But we also wanted to have this site under the Kosciuszko Bridge. There's this huge new park under the Kosciuszko Bridge where somebody that doesn't want to get in a boat can also have an experience of the opera, maybe see some of the performers, maybe they see the audience who's in the boat as performers. And so there's sort of an exchange between like who's on land, who's performing. And so some of those sites will be totally above board, complete permission. Everybody will know about it. And then I kind of think there should be some sites where we just sort of plant a performer like out on a strip of land that might have some, might be slightly private property or something. I think that we should have some flexibility about doing things like that. But as far as being in the creek, it's perfectly legal to have a vessel in the creek with people on it. And so we'll sort of have all the, appropriate channels agreed upon that.
Right.
But it'll be a process, and we're working with the Newtown Creek Alliance and the North Brooklyn Boat Club to make sure that we're, doing it the right way.
One of the things I think is really amazing about Marie's work is reclaiming these spaces that are public spaces that we are discouraged from using public, everything indicates that this is all private and that you can't use it, but in fact you are allowed to go on the water. And so just the putting on the opera and bringing people out there itself is a kind of political action in a way, and that goes along with Marie's Taxi. And I think what's so extraordinary is just it's so derelict in so many ways and so clearly polluted, and it's so beautiful at the same time. It's like what Kurt was saying about that contradiction is everywhere in there, and the perspective that you have and the view of the city is just, it's breathtaking. And so it's going to be interesting to see the kind of garbage beauty experience from the boat that everyone's going to get. Yeah.
I have one other question to go along with that. I don't know. I'm kind of new to this area, but where I come from, I'm from LA. I've worked on a lot of independent films. And I can see that maybe after some time of having so many tours, maybe having the idea of bringing someone in that makes a larger video and presenting this to festivals, because just as Kurt was saying, he didn't really know about this area. I think bringing that from a video standpoint, especially from the short minute, 2 minute video here, it could just be an incredible informational thing that I can see win a lot of wars in the fact of just bringing awareness to an area of New York that most people may not really know anything about.
It's a great idea. We would love that.
Document.
Am I on?
Yes. You were for a second, but now you're muted.
Am I back?
You're back.
Yes.
Okay. Do I need a picture? Start video. Okay. All right, sure.
We'd love to see it.
I'm fascinated by the whole of the project and all of it. Even from the point of view, I've been thinking so much about when this notion of the spectator or what would be the audience now becomes the audience, but there's a durational element to this, which, and normally when you're going out in the boat, you follow the tides, and it can take you near or far. The timing is unpredictable. In a performative context, in a theater, there's a certain duration that exists, and storytelling has a very other pattern. And so I guess I'm very interested in becoming somebody who's on a boat that has no idea how long, what the duration of this opera will be, because it would be contingent upon, you're not using power boats, obviously. It's going to be, you're moving with the movement of the water, so that the water becomes another kind of collaborator in this aspect. So it could take 4 hours or 2 hours. I mean, is that something that you're thinking about? Does that mean anything?
Well, I think, can I answer that one, Kurt, for just a minute?
Yeah, go.
I also think though, Rochelle, that is a great point. And I'm glad that you sort of think that we would keep you out there for 4 hours, because
Yeah.
that's like, I feel like a credit to our, like, I don't know, just being challenging. But I also think that like, it's important that the, like, I think that it would be hard to sit in a canoe for 4 hours, like as an audience member or something. So I think that aspect of it I think people will sort of know what they're getting into. And we're thinking of that part of the thing being like an hour long. But there's also like aspects where maybe people could get out of the boats afterward and sort of greet each other on this in these other areas that are sort of in that same region. And so I sort of think that like, I want people to feel safe in the boat and to have their experience be more about sort of absorbing the place in the same sense of comfort that I do, or not comfort, but just sort of I don't know, the concentrating on the place or something, rather than like, oh my God, I'm trapped on this boat for 4 hours or something. So I think that like navigating that is really interesting part, but I do think it's slightly shorter than that. But I also think like having even the difference between an hour and 15 minutes, I think could give you that sort of the thrill of not knowing, or the thrill of sort of traveling with the tide or something. What do you think about that, Kurt?
Yeah, I mean, I think this idea of duration, and also just not letting people necessarily know what the duration is and when they're going to be going back, sure, is fascinating.
No, we have to let them know.
Of course you do. Of course you do. But yeah, I mean, I think that the idea of the water being a collaborator is really intriguing. I wrote that down, by the way, Rochelle. I think that's really, I don't know yet. I just don't know yet. I want people to feel safe. I want them to be able to feel safe in a way that they are present for the piece without getting tired of the piece.
Yeah.
I think that's always something that, composers are very concerned about. It's like, oh, are they still invested? Are they still here? Yeah, we'll have to, I just don't know yet. Yeah, it's a great point though.
Sophia has the question of, why did the Gowanus Canal Superfund receive help before Newtown?
I was reading that question, Sophia, and I sort of think, I mean, there might be people in this room who actually know the answer to that more. I'm thinking maybe of like David Brooks or Elizabeth Albert might know the answer to that. But I really feel like it's that aspect of the Newtown Creek where you can't see it. I mean, the Gowanus Canal has many, many bridges. It's just a way more like known. It's a shorter span of water. There's like fancy neighborhoods closer to it.
Yeah.
And I just think it gets way more attention, and it's more famous or something. But the Newtown Creek is invisible. It really is. Something about that combination of it being private and utility is really important for its evolution. And that would be my theory about why it was so much later for remediation. I don't know. Thanks for that question. What do you think, Sophia? Does that make sense to you?
No, only because I attended an EPA, well, I don't know, but I did attend the EPA remediation talk in 2015 for the Gowanus Canal, and their plans to, and this isn't talking about restoring ecology, it was just remediation, which is getting the pollutants into a new home, essentially.
Right.
It was so out of mind-blowing, like, possibility that it didn't seem like it would ever happen, and now it is, which is kind of crazy to see barges taking the sludge out. And so I guess I just sensed a relationship between the two.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I remember that too. Everybody said it was so impossible, and then now it's happening. It's pretty amazing.
But it sounds like an unforgettable, yeah, as a former parade float builder, I'm so excited for this whole project. So
Ooh,
yeah.
we need to talk, Sophia. That is
Okay.
good skill. That is a good skill set.
I was going to add also this, that the Newtown Creek also has, you know, of course, famously one of the world's largest human-made disasters still ongoing, which is the oil leaks. And so there's that whole other hurdle. But I did have a question I wanted to ask, because spending a lot of time on boats myself, I am always thinking about, like, where as you were explaining the whole project, which I think is really a terrific, really amazing project, and I'll be one of the first audience members for sure. I'll bring my own boat even, but I did want to ask, how many boats do you envision? Is that a logistical hurdle? It kind of depends on how many you can get, or rather, Marie, maybe how many you can make between now and next year?
Well, maybe, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, and then I'm just also thinking about how the acoustics of the boat itself are always such an important thing, like the clanking of oars and the sound of the water like against the hull of the boat. And just like, there's a whole other acoustic experience with that. But so those are kind of two questions wrapped into one.
It's sort of, all those things are sort of floating around in our minds. We're right now we're thinking that there'll be 4 boats that each fit about 10 people, and that each boat will be out for about an hour. But
Okay.
that's sort of like the very base of what we could do with sort of like the material that we have now. And that those aren't our boats. Those are the North Brooklyn Boat Club fleet. And
Right.
so that's kind of what and we're thinking there's 5 performers that are sort of stationed, or 5 kind of sections that are sort of stationed around the creek. So that's kind of like that's sort of like what we're basing the libretto on, our planning on, but it's all like really flexible. I wanted to show you guys this. Well, actually, maybe I'll just, if you guys notice this like Newtown, this board game that I made for Kurt and Dana, because like it's right over here. I have this other camera on it. But I was, you know, because we're all in separate cities, and I wanted us all to sort of like be able to work on it at the same time. So I made these little, like, these represent like all the boats that we could have. And then these represent like the little performers that we could station around. I pictured like Dana and Kurt and I really like, you know, poring over this board game and like moving little pieces around like we were playing Battleship or something. That hasn't happened yet, but I still have like, you know, high hopes for this moment. We each have a copy of it. Yeah, there's copy. And the director of the Newtown Creek Alliance has a copy of it too.
I had a quick question, sort of piggybacking off of what David was asking about, hi David, about like the acoustics of oars and paddling. And I was also, you know, since it is like this kind of industrial space, like, is there a way, like, do you guys find out whatever construction schedules might be, or are we factoring into the libretto, like, will jackhammers or like clanking be like used and operated around strategically? Like, I was just curious about that work. And the second question is, how do I sign up? Because I will fly there and be on board for trip 1. Like, you just let me know, just say the word, I'm there.
Awesome. Well, Kurt, do you want to talk about that aspect of the sound?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we've thought of doing or that we're considering is that in each boat, so the boat will have the people who are rowing and it will have the audience members, but we also might have a plant in each boat. And the plant will be a performer. And that person will probably be in charge of making some type of sound or musical sound or music inside the actual boat as it's traveling. And so I have to figure out just the practicalities of what that means, what's possible, what it actually sounds like. I really want to make it as effective as possible, but also as foolproof as possible, because I can totally see, having had so many things go wrong after having a lovely tech, a beautiful tech on a beautifully equipped stage. You know, this is not that. This is something that's completely not beautifully equipped. I have to I mean, basically, I just have to figure it out. But yes, I mean, certainly the way that the actual movement, the sound generated by the movement of the boats themselves and the people inside the boats, I have to figure out how to, I guess, sort of direct it or shape it. And I think it's totally possible with these plants inside. You know, each individual plant can sort of become.
Everybody's thinking that you're talking about like the floating island, like trees in the boats, Kurt.
Oh, a little plant. Yeah, I'm gonna have a little like jade plant inside.
House plant. Their boats are gonna be full of house plants, and the people will be swimming beside them. Well, maybe we should actually. Courtney's question brings up a good point, which is that we should tell. It seems like we're sort of getting to the end of our little thing.
Oh yeah.
And maybe we should tell people about how to find us and when it's going to happen. It's not. This whole thing is going to start. We're going to start having sort of modular performances next summer. And then the premiere will be in the summer of 2023. So you have some time to get your ticket to New York City, Courtney. You have like 2 years to come to get it. And the way to keep in touch with us would be to follow, well, we have a Newtown Odyssey YouTube where it's a channel where you can find information out about the Newtown Odyssey. You can also follow us on Instagram at our new Instagram, Newtown Odyssey Instagram account. And just sort of, I don't know, I assume that most of the people in the room have our email addresses because we probably bothered you about coming to this. So just keep in touch with us. It's in 2023, and yeah, that's the story. What else, Kurt?
Yeah, and next summer, basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be having these public workshops, which will be, I mean, they'll be open to everyone, and there'll probably be about 2 or 3 of the modules that'll be in place for people to come to participate, you know, basically observe. Let me just tell everyone, let me just put into the chat the, where did it go? Where did the chat go? Here's our Instagram. So you can join us on Instagram, and then we will join you. Follow us and we'll all follow each other.
And we'll have a mailing list probably by next summer. We'll probably bother you with email and stuff too. We'll be bothering you in so many ways.
And there will be lots of life preservers in the boats. And a helping hand to scoop you out of water. Now, yes, we will put everyone in the dive.
You don't want to fall into the creek.
No, we're going to take.
Thank you, everybody, so much for your questions and for listening to us.
Yeah, thanks for being here, everyone. It's really lovely to have you.
Thank you very much for agreeing to be a part of our collaborations program. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Did you know that Alvin Curran did a really nice piece on boats in Central Park a couple of summers ago? And he had, yeah, it was quite extraordinary. And he had plants, as you're talking about, in the boat. So people are out rowing, and then all of a sudden somebody stands up and they have a saxophone, or, they sort of, get it out of their backpack and they play, a wazoo or something. It was absolutely extraordinary and somehow all completely coordinated. So you might want to look that up. It was just,
definitely thank you for reminding me of that. That's a
yeah. Thank you very, very much. And I want to invite everyone to come back next Tuesday for our next collaborations. And that is Paula Matheson and Olivia Valentine. Paula Matheson was at the Academy in 2017, fellow in music. And Olivia Valentine was there at the same time, and she was a fellow traveler, which I think is really cool, that have a collaboration between a fellow traveler that was there with someone else and and a fellow. So their piece is called Between Systems and Grounds, and it'll be next week. And of course, we'll send out info on that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rochelle. That was
My
lovely.
pleasure. Thank you all. Thank you. I'm there.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Talk soon.
Ciao a tutti.